All right, welcome back. And the intent of this video is to show you how to establish a Minecraft server that your kids can access. And again, if you don't have kids or you have a child that wants to try out this from a standpoint of trying out Linux commands, that's cool as well. For me, I have 4 kids between 6 and 12, and this just became a thing that our children wanted to play Minecraft together, and this became how we were able to do it. I used a spare laptop, and if you watch the last video, you'll notice that I'm not using the actual laptop. I'm using something called VirtualBox. Having an old desktop or laptop is a good way to reuse it and repurpose it. So I'm using something called Debian Linux. This is the ISO that I downloaded, and from the last video I sort of explained that I used a certain type of software to burn that to a USB device and then booted from there. I attempted to use Ubuntu, which is based on Debian, but it kept not working. So I just went back to the actual source. So I downloaded this file, which is 640 megs. And then in this case, I'll show you VirtualBox, but like I said, I used an actual older laptop. If you hit so in case you're using VirtualBox, you'll go ahead and name it. In this case, it's super easy just to call it Minecraft. We're using Debian. On my laptop, it was 8 gigs, so that's fine. I just picked a random number. I created it. For this instance, I'm doing a VMDK, and then I will dynamically allocate. Again, if you're on your own desktop or laptop, that doesn't matter. If you're using a virtual machine, if you're using a virtual instance, you'll need to make this large enough. When I do a backup of our Minecraft, it's at least 1 gig for every backup. So you just have to be aware of that, because the space for the operating system and all the things, you just have to be aware. If you're doing like I did, where I have a hard drive and I'm using the entire thing, then that may not be a big issue. In this case, I'm using virtualization, and that uses my computer's resources, and I just have to be aware of the sizes and how it's allocated. All right. In the instance you are using virtualization in this VirtualBox, the semi configuration is go to settings, go to network, go to bridged, and this will just allow you to access that. All right, we're going to go ahead and start this instance. And again, if you are using an old laptop or repurposing something else, that is perfectly fine and all good. All right, so we are trying to launch this thing. All right, here we go. So it just launched. So I'm going to ensure, so you saw that Debian, I have the ISO. I'm going to choose a disk image. I'm going to add the disk image. I'm going to find it. I just happen to have this folder that has it. And I'm going to go ahead and go boom, choose. Here, let's do this again. Reset. All right, so that little glitch there. So because we're doing this, and this is called a headless server, you want to go down to install. All right, I am going to make this bigger. All right, so I'm going to skip through a couple of these. I'm going to say United States, that's fine. Actually, I'm in Australia, but whatever, it doesn't even matter at this case. Pick the one that's appropriate for you. You'll see that it'll take time based on your actual hardware that you have. I intend to do this in general real time, so if you're following along, you'll be able to actually see what we're doing. All right, so if you're doing this on an actual physical device, a laptop, a desktop, you'll see very similar stuff as you would see in this virtual machine. All right, so what's the host name? Again, you can pick anything. Just for ease, I'll pick Minecraft. Domain, doesn't matter. The root password, so go ahead. The root is like the administrative password if you're familiar with Windows. You just hit enter. All right, so because it's my channel, we're going to go ahead and do that. Sure, username, and then the password for that username. And I'll explain this a little bit later as this is being loaded. All right, again, I'm in Australia. It's not quite Hawaii, but I'll just go with it. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily matter what you pick here. I'm going to pick this one, but it doesn't matter. When you actually, if you have it virtualized or a physical drive, you can pick something. Again, this is the same thing. You can pick all files in one partition. You can separate the different partitions. If you're not familiar with Linux, just pick the default. What this says is it's about to overwrite your drive. So if you've got something else on it or whatever, probably not what you want to do, but in this case, I'm going to write the changes and then again, write the changes. This goes through it. When I chose to allow it to pick its own configuration, this is what it would do, which is fine. I mean, we're not doing anything special, so it's installing the base system. So let's go back to the root user. Root user is also sometimes called the super user, or later on we'll hear the SU, or super user. It's like the administrator of the system. We set up a personal account, and that's how we'll log into the server to kind of turn it on, turn it off, and do backups. And there's a thing in Linux where you kind of protect the administrative user from the actual kind of like everyday type user. In this case, really you're going to have 3 user accounts. You're going to have the administrative user. You're going to have this thing called the system user. It's going to be a user called Minecraft, and it's just going to be able to run things, and then you're going to have your own account. I picked Brody971. It's clearly on my YouTube channel, but you can choose anything that you want, and of course the passwords can be whatever you want as well. All right, so in this case, a package manager in Linux is kind of like your update server. If you're a Windows user, you will, ask, hey, what kind of updates or upgrades will I have? This is what this is. So yes, use an update manager. Again, I'm in Australia, but in this case, it doesn't really matter. So I'll go ahead and just go through it. So apt, we'll see later on. It's the package manager for Debian or Ubuntu. If you're using something like Red Hat or Fedora or something else, you'll find a different package manager. It'll be something called yum or YUM. In this case, apt is the way you update the software, or it's the way you install other software onto the server. So it's taken its time. Of course, this probably takes a little bit extra time because I picked the United States and I'm in Australia, but it will go through. So the idea here is we're going to establish the Linux server. We would call that a headless server. That just means it doesn't have a graphical interface. Then we will configure it so we can do the commands for Minecraft. We will install Minecraft. It's pretty easy to install it. And then we'll configure it. We'll configure Minecraft. And then we'll do a couple of optional tailoring. So we'll pick a specific seed and a couple other things. And then we'll do some automation. All right, so this is telling us configure popularity content. No, I don't care about a usage survey. And here, to make it headless, and you can pick whatever, but for me, I don't need any of these. The only two I care about is the SSH server, and this is what, if you watch the previous video, we talked about PuTTY. That's how we connect, and then standard utilities. If you don't do this, one of the first steps we'll do is we will install a bunch of software. With standard utilities, it actually installs the majority of them. So if you're using something else other than Debian, and that's not an option, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install a series of applications that kind of enable us to install and configure and automate some of the scripts. So you can see, this is actually pretty fast considering I'm in Australia and I'm reaching back to the United States. So so we'll go ahead and kind of wait for this to install all the software. And again, I'm attempting to do this real time. That way, if you're following along, it's not that far off and I'm not skipping ahead. You can see OpenSSH, that's the SSH server that we picked earlier. There was a couple other things in there. So the grub bootloader just basically just says, yeah, you can boot from the drive that we said, and then you pick the drive that we established. That's less of an important thing when you're not being very specific about how you partition out your configuration. All right, so that did it. That installed Linux. Not difficult. You just have to go through the steps and pick pieces of it. This will be similar to how you would do it on an actual desktop or laptop. That would fail for me when I did Ubuntu, and I'll put in one thing here. So when you first log in, you can log in a number of ways. So you remember we did root, and we can log in as root. Or we had a username and we put in there that username and the password, and you can do this, which is called super user and then dash, and that will, and if you put in the root password, you see this is now you're the root of. So whichever way you want to do it initially, that's fine. Later on we'll do something slightly different. So once we are doing, or once we have this, we're in root. Root is a server admin, so please be careful what you actually do once you're here. All right. There, when we did the system utilities, we got something called Nano, which is a text editor. And what we'll do is we'll go, lots of different ways, but we'll do Nano, etc, apt. Remember, apt is the package manager. That's how you update stuff. So what I just did, you may not have noticed. So I did apt, and then when I put a couple of letters, I hit the tab button, and it completes it. If there's multiple things, it will then list it, but in this case, it completes it. Of course, I added way more. So when I was doing my laptop, I received a number of errors. And it basically said certain drivers were not available, and it ended up being mostly associated to networking devices on my laptop that didn't seem to be supported by the base image. And you think about it, is this is a free set of software, and so they're not going to keep proprietary software or drivers within it. So by doing what I just did, I added the non-free. Let me do that again. No, cancel. So you see down here at the bottom, if you do exit, Control X, save modified, yes, save it to that name right there, and then you're good to go. What we just did is, if you found something when you were updating or installing and that gave you errors, that should provide you the ability to download drivers. So what we do is we'll do apt get update. So this will update all the repositories. And then we'll do apt get upgrade, which if there's anything there. So when I did this on the laptop that I installed, it actually installed drivers that weren't in the base Debian image. In this case, it's not that. It doesn't do that. So I already did Nano, but in case you don't have that, you would do apt get install Nano, and of course it's going to tell you it's already there. And then what you will do is user mod you will do apt get install sudo. So sudo allows a non-admin user to promote themselves as a admin user. So it went through, did its thing. So user mod a lowercase a uppercase G sudo. So we're adding a user to the sudo group, and remember that was the one I created. the normal user. All right, and that is done. In the case that doesn't work, I'll show you etc sudoer. Right, so after you do that, you come down to this line, and then you put in your username, whatever you choose, and then just follow the pattern that's above. Now, this is not recommended. The adding to the sudoer group is what is recommended, what we just did. But, you know, if you are not putting this on the internet, and there's ways around it. So I'm going to hit Control X, save to modified buffer, yes. And then I'm going to go ahead and write it. Couple command line things that we're going to use. So clear just clears the screen. And we'll end up getting into a couple of other things later on. So one of the last things in this video is this thing called IP address. If you see, that's the IP address, 192.168.11.146. So 192.168.11.146. We'll need to remember that for, so in the first video, or the one before this, I talked about PuTTY. This is what we'll do. We'll take that IP address, we'll put it in here in PuTTY. We'll make sure the port is 22, and it's SSH from what we originally did. And we'll make sure, in this case, this is the instance, and that's where we are. So that's the end of this video, and we thank you, or I thank you, for watching. And if you want to join for the next one, which is really kind of configuring Minecraft, this was just setting up Linux for the very basic things that you need to do. It's not difficult. Hopefully you didn't find it difficult. All right, thank you.